So at this point, we're a week and a half into training camp, and there are so many storylines that have developed in Santa Clara. So on today's San Francisco 49ers Report by Chat Sports, I'm Chase Sr., a training camp Q&A where we open up the floor and take all of your questions. We begin here with this $10 donation coming in from Black Mask. Appreciate your support of the show. Javon Kinlaw has to show out, brother. Either the Niners or somewhere else. The defensive line right now is stacked. And I think that this 49ers defensive line is certainly a stacked unit. Their depth is somewhat of a concern, although if Javon Kinlaw is able to be that player that the Niners envisioned him being when they took him in the first round in 2020, it just makes this entire defensive line that much better and that much deeper because he can be a better pass rush defensive tackle than he's been. That's number one. And two, he can help a defensive line that wasn't great in stopping the run last year, and that was especially exposed against the Philadelphia Eagles in the NFC Championship game. The big-ticket free agent signing for the Niners this offseason was Javon Hargrave. He is more of a pass-rushing defensive tackle, whereas Kinlaw can help you as that backup behind Eric Armstead and Javon Hargrave and just be that force who can occupy double teams, beat offensive linemen on one-on-ones with some of those bull rushes. When you look at him and you look at his body type, his physique, he's always looked the part. He simply just has to stay healthy. And I imagine he feels the heat right now. The Niners declined his fifth-year option, so this is the final year of his contract. He's looking to play well, stay healthy, and then in turn get paid by either the Niners or another team after 2023. Black Mask with another super chat, this time a $50 donation. How does our secondary look in camp? This is by far our weakest point on the defense last year. So interesting developments here in the secondary. Charvarius Ward earlier this week did sit out. Deommodore Lenoir has had some good moments on breaking on the football. Samuel Womack has been able to perform pretty well. If everything stays in line and everybody's able to stay healthy, this is what that secondary looks like. Charvarius Ward, Talanoa Hufanga, and Deshaun Gibson as your starting safeties. Deommodore Lenoir, the other outside corner opposite of Charvarius Ward, and then Isaiah Oliver as well. Darrell Luter Jr., we haven't been able to see him because he's been placed on PUP with an undisclosed injury. Samuel Womack, I think, has some potential. Ambry Thomas needs to have a good camp. Deshaun Jameson is the UDFA out of Texas that's been impressing a lot of people. But I actually disagree, Black Mask. I don't think that unit was that much of a concern and that much of a weakness last year. Hufanga was an all-pro. Deshaun Gibson played at a borderline all-pro level. Down the stretch, I thought that Deommodore Lenoir played well. And Charvarius Ward, for what the Niners were paying him, about $14 million per year, was a pretty solid cornerback. The depth, somewhat of an issue, but if the young players end up performing well and they fortify that depth, then that allows you to have young, affordable players on this team who you might be able to turn the keys to if an injury does happen. How many games will the Niners win this year? That is our question for today's show. Predict it for us down in the comment section. I think 12-13 is a good guess for me. Daniel Johnson, give Trey Lance a shot during the preseason, and if he doesn't impress, put in Brock Purdy. So Trey Lance is going to have ample opportunities. I'm fascinated to see if Purdy is going to start the game against the Las Vegas Raiders next weekend. Can you believe that preseason football is almost here? So because of his injury, I wouldn't start Purdy and I wouldn't play him, and I want to see what Trey Lance can be, either for my football team because I'm intrigued by the potential, or dangle him out there as trade bait to see if you can get a second, third round pick, which at this point is highly doubtful. But if Lance plays well, then you know that you have a quarterback who you can either start at some point, if not week one, depending on how Purdy fares, how the elbow is. He could be a very high-level backup for you. Down the road, you still have a guy who has potential, or use him as a trade chip. But he's going to get a shot during the preseason. And if he rises up, if he performs well, it's going to make that Niners decision at quarterback very, very difficult. Evan Hinders, I think Ronnie Bell will be another Cordero Patterson-type talent. So he doesn't have the body type of Cordarrelle Patterson, and he doesn't have the special teams ability of Cordarrelle Patterson. I will say this, though. His ball skills are excellent. They were excellent at Michigan, and they flashed so far in rookie minicamp, OTAs, and so far in training camp. Ronnie Bell can go up and get it, and he can make a lot of contested catches. And at Michigan, I love the production, a little bit slighter, but if he's slighter and he's still coming down with some of those 50-50 balls, you can make this roster, and he could make this team as wide receiver 6 if they elect to hold 6. Either way, I'm interested to see what he can do in the preseason as well. Goon Squad, how many sacks will Bosa get this year? Do you think that he will get off to a slow start like the last few years? I don't think that Bosa will get off to a slow start. If you're talking about Bosa getting off to a slow start, I don't think that he gets off to a slow start. If you're talking about the Niners as a team getting off to a slow start, then I see where you're coming from, because I started covering this team in 2021. 2021, they started 3-5. Last year, they started 3-4 and then ran the table. This year, though, because the middle part of that schedule is a little bit difficult, I think they have to get off to a fast start. And you don't want to be pressured into playing catch-up the middle, latter portion of the year. So I hope that Kyle Shanahan is able to remedy that and start this season off a little bit quicker. Week 1 against Pittsburgh is going to be a very difficult game. In season openers, the Steelers have a very good record at home. They're also a pretty solid team, especially defensively. TJ Watt against Colton McKivitz, it's not going to be easy. Mike Tomlin always has his team ready to play for a big game. Kenny Pickett has made some strides. George Pickens, I'm not sure there's a DB on this team that can jump up with him on a 50-50 ball. They're a quality team. As for Bosa, I think he's going to get like 15, 16 sacks. Not as many as last year, but that's okay because the Niners as a team are going to have more sacks along that defensive line. Mr. Block Ice, can't wait to see our preseason games. Which one of the new players from our rookies to new signings will break out? So I've said this, I think Isaiah Oliver, the slot nickel cornerback, he is going to be a massive surprise for a lot of people out there just because he wasn't a popular name. I think he's going to play well and an important role on this defense. I think Javon Hargrave is going to have another great year, a perfect complement to Nick Bosa there. I want to see what Colton McKivitz can do because so far he's looked the part in training camp. Other than that, it's not like the Niners made a bunch of splash signings. But as far as the rookies go, if Darrell Luter Jr. can play at any point, that might be doubtful. I'm intrigued by what he'll be able to accomplish. I want to see what the backup tight ends can do as well. Can they unseat Charlie Warner and Ross Dwelley as the backup tight ends? I think that there's a possibility for that with Braden Willis and Cam Latu. I'm just kind of going through that roster. Jake Moody. Anytime the Niners have an opportunity to put him out there for a kick in the preseason, pressure's on you, young fella. What can you do? Make sure you subscribe to the show because we open up the floor. We take your questions here on the program because I love chopping it up with the faithful, and we give you year-round analysis on the Niners. Wet Noodle 187, do you have any surprise cuts for the 53-man roster? Running back could be a difficult decision because Ty Davis-Price looks great, and they might be more obligated to have him on the roster as a former third-round pick as compared to Jordan Mason. Both of them have worked on pass catching out of the backfield. Ty Davis-Price is really impressing a lot of people, whereas I haven't heard much out of Jordan Mason. So maybe Jordan Mason, maybe Danny Gray, because Chris Conley's been having a good camp. And if they have to make a difficult roster decision at wide receiver because that position group is a little bit backloaded, maybe him. Those would be two surprises for me. Mamba Legend, the Niners should trade for Lane Johnson and Tristan Wirfs for the offensive line. What do you think? Well, you don't need both, and you can't afford both. Lane Johnson's not going anywhere. He's the best right tackle in the game. You would have to give up a whole lot for him, and he loves playing in Philadelphia. I mean, he defines that franchise and that fan base. So you're not going to trade for him. Tristan Wirfs would be interesting because I love the player, and the Buccaneers last year were bad. This year, they have a quarterback competition between Baker Mayfield and Kyle Trask, a quarterback competition I've heard nothing about. So that can't be good. And he's going to be in line for a monster payday. He's already one of the best offensive tackles in the game. So I would do it. But in order to get him, again, the price tag is very, very high. Johnny, What are your thoughts on D. Winters? We'll see. This is a player that I also want to see in the preseason. He was fast to hit the gap last year, and I like his speed, but I want to see how that college speed translates to the NFL level. Evan Hinders again. Will Taco Charlton make the 53-man roster? So in his first practice on Tuesday, he got signed, and he had a would-be sack and won a couple of one-on-one drills. Former first-round pick. These players all had would-be sacks on Tuesday. Taco Charlton, Javon Hargrave, and Javon Kinlaw. I think they brought him in because of the pedigree. Former first-round pick. The Dallas Cowboys took him over TJ Watt. He's never really panned out, but how often have we seen Chris Kocurek maximize defensive linemen? Can he do it with Taco Charlton? We'll see. He's on the outside looking in of that roster bubble. Lore, what should we expect this season? You expect a good year. This is a team with future Hall of Famers, All-Pros, and Pro Bowlers, and one of the best coaches in the NFL. Quarterback is a question, but they have three of them that I think can win with this team. The big question at that quarterback spot, are any of them good enough to actually win a Super Bowl? That's the underlying question going into 2023. Logan, how do you see Kalia Davis performing this year? So he's been hurt this week. Very athletic defensive tackle who was also hurt at UCF. Tore his ACL his final year there. Still, the Niners took him late in the draft 2 years ago. Speaking of defensive linemen, and I'm just like thinking of this as I got that question earlier about which rookies I'm excited to see. A young player I'm excited to see, Drake Jackson. Drake Jackson has added 13 pounds of muscle throughout this offseason. He has a ton of ability. He's still really, really young, 22 years old, I believe, and he feels quicker. He feels stronger. And in his first 5 games last year, he had a couple of sacks. Then he wore down and was a healthy scratch for several games down that stretch run. So him and Kalia Davis, of course, too, Logan. Black Mask. On the secondary, one thing I didn't consider was the hiring of Steve Wilks. This is huge. If you could have hired a defensive coordinator when you lost D'Amico Ryans, that wasn't going to be a massive blow. Steve Wilks is probably the best name that you could have gone with. And who's to say he can't be better than D'Amico Ryans? I think the Niners might be a little bit more aggressive with blitz packages. I'd like to see it. He did send home more blitzes last year with Carolina than what D'Amico Ryans did with San Francisco last year. So I'm excited for Steve Wilks. He's also a very good defensive backs coach because he does have a defensive back background, as Black Mass does point out. Make sure you hit me up, Twitter and Instagram. If you didn't get your question answered today, just slide in the DMs. I'll do my best to get back to you at Chase_Senior. As always, it's always a blast being able to talk with everybody. This is the San Francisco 49ers Report. Our coverage has been starting to heat up over the last few weeks, and we're going to continue to bring you the best content here on YouTube.